So we gather as servants of the sacred, however we may name or experience it, as ministers, practitioners, healers, and seekers. Today we explore one of humanity's greatest challenges, how to transform the poison of violation into the medicine of liberation, how to honor our rage while choosing our freedom. And with that, I'd love to hear your experiences.
Well, I have a little quote here too that that I like. In most cases, my resentment is based on a persistent pattern of behavior I'm not willing to accept. I forgive the other person because that's what I need to do for me. I don't continue accepting unacceptable behavior. Sometimes forgiving includes letting go of a harmful relationship and moving on. Because when I forgive before I leave, I can walk away feeling clean with no negative ties to prevent me from continuing my journey toward health and happiness.
Very nice. Hi, Katrina. Are you in Jamaica?
She's back.
Oh, she is?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am back. Hi.
Hi. Welcome home. Got a little sneak peek of you.
Oh my God, I'm in the bed still because I sprained my foot,
Oh no.
but it was a great time.
Good. Glad.
Mm.
Sounds like 3/4 of us are a mess this week.
So we're talking about forgiveness.
We are. What wise words do you have?
Well, for me, you grow up hearing, you're always supposed to forgive another person for things that happened and so on and so forth. But I learned, of course, the forgiveness part is for you, because when you don't forgive someone for something that happened, you continue to carry that energy around with you, and it drags you down, and it gets so big and so heavy to carry around the emotion of something that happened. A person can continue to go about their day, but with us, and we carry around the energy of something that felt traumatizing, or we blame ourselves for, like, I don't know. It's just heavy. So forgiveness is actually for you, so that you can move past something and get on with your life, right? Like, there's things that happen, you learn a lesson. There's so many things, like, for example, whether it's a past relationship, something that someone has done to you, and you just carry that. It's heavy. It's heavy. And when you decide to say, you know what, whether I screwed up or that person screwed up, I'm not going to allow this to have power over me anymore.
Right.
That is so healing for you.
Yeah.
As a person, it's so healing for me. There's so many things now I can look back and be like, yeah, that that did happen. But I can look at it objectively now and be
Yeah.
like, yeah, I did that. Or yeah, I allowed that to happen. Or even better, that wasn't my fault. When you go back to something, though, knowingly that it's something horrible for you, we get over things in stages, but it's how we heal. Forgiving someone is healing. It's healing for you. So those are my words.
Thank you. Very
In
nice.
in the 12-step program, they teach us that self-forgiveness has to come first.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So it's that one of the quotes is self-forgiveness clears the path to forgiving others. And that's interesting.
Yeah. Katrina, I'm glad you brought that up, because during my week vacation with family, we had like 20 people there. And everything's going pretty well, and everybody's having a good time. And then all of a sudden, my oldest son, comes up to me and said, "I've had it with my brother, blah blah blah," and gives all the reason. And I told him off and blah blah blah. And I'm saying, whoa, where does that come from? And then his other brother pitches in, and yeah, we can never win with him. He's always, got something better than, or now he doesn't acknowledge us. So I said, my son, I said, okay, what are you trying to win? So I was trying to get him to look at what's his part in it. But what you just showed me was I have an issue with my son. I'm the one that needs to get involved in forgiveness. I don't want to hold a grievance for sure against my son, who I thought would know better. and, but you're right. You're absolutely right. As much as, and I tried not to interfere. That's all. I'm often try to rescue people, right? Try to get them to see and communicate and get along better. There's nothing wrong with that, but I decided I'm going to let it go this time. I'm not going to give it any more energy. But you're right. If I'm holding a grievance against my two sons who feel a necessity to be upset with my other son, it's my problem. So thank you, Katrina, for I can look at that now.
Aw, divine timing in all things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it helps to know even a little bit of another person's story. And I say this because, growing up, like my mom loved me. That's never been a question. But a lot of the things that she did wasn't right. And so we had such a off on relationship. Anybody asked me to this day, even when I was younger, my mom loved me. But the things that she would do didn't always show her love. And then out of guilt, she would do certain things, so on and so forth. And so as I grew up and as an adult, we weren't close at all. And it wasn't until I learned a lot of things that happened to her in her childhood, all the way up to an adult, that I was able to understand that the problem was not me. The problem was not me. And I felt very bad for things that had happened to her because, especially with an older generation, and even now, the way a lot of us are taught, we don't go to anyone for mental health. Things are pushed under the rug. We handle things ourselves. But as I learned a lot of her story, I was able to forgive her. I actually, before my mom passed, like she will always tell me I'm her best friend. And I actually nurtured her. It's like I was the mom and she needed that because she never had it. But the healing for me, again, and part of that forgiveness was learning some more of her story where I can sit back and be like, okay, wait. And it didn't make anything better, not at all. It didn't make it okay, is what I should say. It didn't make the things that she did okay, but the understanding opened a whole new view and where I can be like, it's not me. It really wasn't me. I wasn't unlovable. I wasn't at fault. I was at fault for some things. But I wasn't, I was okay. I was actually, you know, okay with so many things. And I think that too, like sometimes understanding another person's point of view, of course, it never makes things that are bad okay, but it helps with your understanding and goes a long way with forgiveness, right? Because it's not always one point of view. The lens goes more than one way. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's very true because that's why I got involved in the 12-step program because my father was an alcoholic and my childhood wasn't always fun. And it affected me a lot. I mean, I married my dad. I married an alcoholic because that's what I was used to, and on and on and on. But once I found Al-Anon, and we study our family of origin, and looking back, I understand why he was like that because I looked at his parents, my grandparents, and that helped me to understand a lot about why he was the way he was. And that's how I was able to forgive him because I know he didn't know any better.
Right? It doesn't make the things he did okay,
No.
but understanding you can forgive yourself. You can forgive him because you're able to forgive yourself. It makes you look at yourself in a different light. Like, I wasn't unlovable. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't this. I wasn't that. It was the other person. And
Right.
then understanding that everyone has their own journey to healing. Some people don't know how to heal. Some people never had the opportunity to take advantage of it, but you did.
Yep.
And look at you, not perfect, but healing. And I say that about myself too, because none of us are not perfect, but healing. And we have the tools to be able to not only heal ourselves, but other people as well on the journey.
Yeah. Understanding his journey was good for me to be able to forgive him.
Yeah, I find on a broader scale, I tend to want to condemn Putin, who way he handles his opposition, he either kills them or puts them in jail.
Mm.
And I'm certainly against his war in Ukraine. It's hard to differentiate between the act and the actor. Now, I think you were alluding to that, Christina. Okay. What I'm saying is, if I can separate the act from the actor, I don't have to approve of their actions. But if I condemn them as a person or individual, then I'm not understanding. I don't have the understanding of what goes on in their mentality. And it's like if I condemn the actor, I'm condemning a part of myself. So it's, I've learned that if I can differentiate between the actor and the actor, if I don't condemn the actor, if I don't condemn, excuse me, it's a residual of the smoke I've inhaled. Um, so, I don't want to condemn. I don't want to condone an action that I think is deplorable, but I don't want to condemn the individual that created that action because we're all one, and that person is part of me, and I'm part of them. So I only injure myself if I condemn them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like applying your vibration to a protective nature of humanity as opposed to the chaos of the anger or the really, I guess, massively destructive low vibration of, you know, war and death and, just revenge kind of anger. There's the anger that wants to do something about it, like the protesters out on the street. And then there's the prescriptive vibration, which is what I'm kind of leaning toward, is the peacemaker, but also addressing the issue and standing firm in that place of, I acknowledge that what I'm seeing is going wrong. I don't know that I can do anything at it at the high level of where maybe some of the anger emotion comes from. I'm going to destroy the leader that's making all this happen instead of peacefully raising the vibration of a mass of people that can step up, like the Greta Thunbergs, basically will activate a bunch of people that can make that choice, that conscious choice to protect the value of humanity. And that transfers that anger of person actor to this is our situation in society.
Hmm. So I guess it really boils down to the energy that you're coming at a person with, right? Like you were saying, Nikki, whether it's anger or if it's from a better and a higher place.
Yeah.
Because things that are not right are not right. Let's think about all the people who have sacrificed their time and their efforts and sometimes themselves for, I don't want to say the greater good, but kind of in a way, yeah, all the things that happened that weren't right. If you sit back and do nothing, it's kind of like you're condoning it,
Right.
right?
Right.
But you don't have to go and try and fix everything from a standpoint where I'm going to do this and I'm going to, you know what I mean? You don't have to hurt people to fix things.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're protecting your life or your family or things like that, I mean, there's certain situations I think that there's certain things that call for certain situations, but you don't have to go out and forcibly harm people to fix things.
Right.
You don't. So it's really the energy and the attitude that you go about things with. But if I'm out somewhere and I see a wrong, I'm absolutely gonna address it,
Yeah.
you know. And then there's some things where people are like, oh, that's not my business. It really depends. It depends, but I'm not gonna let someone be hurt and I can help.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is.
Yeah. I think it's the way you're approaching, the like where you're coming from is not to be the disruptor necessarily,
Right.
but to be someone that can take a stand for a cause or a purpose or a way of coexisting with our fellow humans and not necessarily condone the destructive hate
Right.
and maybe even somehow alchemize that to become a form of love, whether it's tough love or whatever sort of um, alternative that you can offer to the situation so that maybe they can reframe it as well.
I'm reading a book right now about the person in Russia who put up the greatest opposition against Putin. I mean, time after time again, he raised a lot of political interest in opposing Putin for all the dastardly things he did, and eventually, Putin had him in prison lots of times for no reason at all, just to get him out from conversations about negative aspects of Putin's administration. But he was put in jail lots of times, and then he was poisoned, and the poison almost killed him, and he survived that. So he wrote this wonderful book about his journey. And the point he makes, he knows, absolutely knows he's going to die because that's what Putin does. And he also knows that it's devastating to his family. And they understand his passion and his need to do this. And what he eventually says, he says, I'm one of the 1% of the people that follow my passion or my bliss. That this is, no matter what happens to me, I need to go forth and do this. And he was willing to put his life at risk and his family, and they supported him in doing it. So it's a great example of it's all right, for a person, if you feel inspired to do something and you're willing to put your whole self into it. That's a great example. Uh, and yes, he loved Russia. He loved his country, and he wanted the government to be more helpful to the people who were running the country. So it's a great example of compassion and passion and a willingness to sacrifice to hopefully bring about a better result. That's what his life's about. So I think what he's saying, it's all right to take a stand. In fact, it's necessary. Um, so oftentimes we're um, too busy to follow through and do what needs to be done.
Yeah, I think that brings to mind a conversation I had with one of my clients. This is somebody who's paying me to make him look good. And he was making comments about, the political scene, and he wanted to take out the leadership, and I think I'm going to go buy a gun and all this kind of stuff. And I said, I think what you're really wanting to do, and I just kind of gently tried to bring him back around to the system in chaos like that, in these, powerful people trying to massively change our minds about what's right and wrong, are designing it so that we stay in our lizard brain. So we're staying in that anger state and we're staying in that emotion of chaos and disruption by design. That's how they keep us, down. And that's how they keep us compliant to whatever's going on. And after a while, he was able to finally digest that and say, yeah, I don't want to stay in my lizard brain. And he's trying to be spiritual and esoteric. He's been seeing shamans and trying to do some self work. And I said, think about what these leaders that you're following would say to that. And at a recent conference, we had a shaman from Ecuador come up, and he was basically repeatedly throughout the weekend when people were saying, oh, this devastation of the fires and all these things going wrong. He says, try not to respond in just anger. You can express that, get rid of that emotion, of course. But when you release that and come at it from a sense of love or a higher state of vibration, you will find much more creative ways and much more compatible allies to stand for that cause, for that purpose that you're about to do. And so he was able to go from, I'm going to buy a gun and take this person out, to, you're right. I need to be a decent human being myself and not go down the path of doing exactly what they're doing and mocking it, but saying it's on the opposite side of the fence. And it's like this violence and this anger on social media, especially to the political scene. It's like I can't even tell anymore which side is right or wrong, because they're posing it in such a way that it's all corrupt, both sides. And so I'm just trying to come at it from a way that I can manage it, because I can't go buy a gun and take somebody out and change the system. And I can't necessarily be available to go demonstrate in the streets or boycott all of the things that I actually need to get by in this world, because I'm still in survival mode too. But what can I do? And that is bring back that sense of peacefulness. And I can be a grounding cord for somebody like that who's getting out of hand. And as ministers, maybe that's part of our role, is to take other people into a state of, okay, can you consider that there's another way or another path or a parallel way to coexist with people that are just outrageously doing harmful things? And that's kind of where I'm trying to focus is, okay, even though there is chaos and it's going to topple off, and we're talking about extinction of humanity and all that kind of stuff, but nature's laws, if you go back to the nature of things, even forest fires sprout new pine cone seeds, and it's like a path to regeneration, even if something is taken out in a way that honors that cycle of life or that circle of life. And so that's kind of where I'm leaning, and maybe trying to inspire other people to consider that it doesn't have to be the hateful speech and to calling people names. And like you, Charlie, going through this with your sons, it's like you love your sons regardless. And so what do you do to help find that balance where people can kind of be in harmony, even though they don't necessarily agree? So those are my thoughts.
It's
Well,
a very good point. You talk about fighting fire with fire. So
Yeah.
if you're fighting anger with anger, you're right. You just become part of you haven't transmuted, you haven't changed, you haven't raised your attitude to a higher altitude.
I like that attitude to altitude.
Can we just
on this,
hop in or
go ahead.
how are we?
Yeah, it's popcorn. It's all us.
Well, Laura, you were here before me. I'm going to popcorn in after you.
Okay. On the spiritual side, I was very angry with my father when he passed because he had called my daughter in a drunken stupor and said horrible, awful things, and I was really angry. And he died a couple of days later. And I was at a message circle with a medium that I hold very dear, Joyce Orchid. Paula knows her, and she said, before I start the message circle, I have someone here that won't let me start because he needs to give someone a message. And she described him, and she said his name is a one syllable word, and my dad was called Bud. And so I thought, I think that's my father. and so and so I said, yeah, that's my father. And she said, well, he's stuck on a plateau and he can't move forward until he is forgiven. And I'm like, okay. And so after the thing was over, I went up to her and I said, how do I do that? I hold so much resentment and anger. And she said, set a picture of him out somewhere where you'll see it every day. And when you pass it every day, smile and say, I love you. And about 6 months later, I was at a different message circle in a different town. And it was a man. And he said to me, I have a message for you from your a father figure. And he's saying, thank you. I've moved on.
That's cool.
It was interesting.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for that. From what I love about circles that really allow freedom of expression is that we have different perspectives. I was looking for the author of a book called Fire with Fire. She's an amazing woman, and I love her. And I watched her on television, but about five individuals in their place. So you have a different perspective. You got me on the email. It was in my junk too, but I saw the word sacred anger. I've been in recovery and personal growth for 40 years. And when I got into recovery, I was throwing up my food and I couldn't help it. Some people debt, some people don't pay attention to the money, sex addiction, alcoholism. I was throwing up my food and I couldn't stop. I tried hard. And I remember this was in the late 80s. I had stopped throwing up my food and I was in support groups and I was talking about it and I was going through what was underneath and blah, blah, blah. And I'd had a conversation with someone and she started yelling at me and raging at me. And I just kept saying, it was a friend from high school. I just kept saying, if you don't stop yelling, I'm going to hang up. Because I had learned how to take care of myself. I don't have to tolerate abusive behavior. And she kept going. And I said, I love you. And I hung up. It was like a blackout, if you've ever heard of alcoholic blackouts. The next thing I noticed, I was in the refrigerator and I was scanning up and down. And I finally said aloud, I slammed the door and I said, I am not hungry. I am angry. And I learned how to be with my anger in a healthy way so I could take care of myself. The word boundary means goal. How do I reach the goals and the visions if I don't have good boundaries? And I don't believe some emotions are good and some are bad. I think they just are. And what I do with them is what makes the difference. So I love my healthy anger. If I were, I came in when Katrina was talking about how you do it. I could spend my whole 24 hours confronting people, driving the way you're talking to each other. So I'm discerning, but I love my anger. It helps me see what is my part and what is not, and how can I take care of myself or take a stand for someone else. And I was at a march in Washington, D.C., where we didn't march. There were so many of us, we couldn't move. But boy, we stood firm. Unless someone had to pee, then the line, woman has to pee. And then we make a line. But we couldn't march, but we were there and we were there together. And it, for me, will always make a difference for me. So I love my anger. I have a responsibility to use it, in a discerning way. And for me, it was really important to learn how to use it to care. The gift of anger for me is strength. So thank you for listening. I love all these different perspectives.
Yeah, and I love the point that you make that it is discerning and you get to choose how you express your anger. That's
Hmm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Something that stood out that you said, Sally, it's that you love your anger. It makes me think of when we're online or whatever social media and you hear people say good vibes only. And
Yeah,
I'm thinking to myself, if you didn't know sadness, you wouldn't know joy. If you didn't know anger, you wouldn't know the other side.
yeah,
We have these emotions for a reason. If you have only good vibes and that is it, you're really out of balance. Just as much as if you only have lower vibrational energy, right? We are a balance of everything. It's balance. That's the thing. Like even when we do Reiki or pranic healing, we're trying to put somebody back in balance. And
yeah.
balance is different for all of us. So good vibes only, yeah, that's good in theory, but it's not really true. You need
Yeah,
to be able to deal with your anger to get yourself back into balance,
yeah,
right? So when we do shadow work, we deal with the shadows and we bring them up to the light just enough where we can find balance. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I will not say that I don't have road rage because man, sometimes I do, and I'll be like, "What the heck am I doing?" So now these days I'll be like, someone who cuts me off or does whatever, I'll be like, I hope they get to where they're going. I hope they get there safely. Because there was once a time, actually, when my mom passed, and I'm on the road and I'm trying to jump in front of people, and this guy was cutting me off for no reason. And I remember like hopping out of my car, and I must have looked crazy. And I'm like, my mom's retired. I'm trying to get there and whatever. And his look was just kind of like, oh. And it's the look that now, like after having that experience, I'm just like, you got to learn how to deal with your anger. Um, Learning how to deal with my anger, first of all, like no one's going to push me around. They just don't. But I don't have to be a total jerk to someone to be able to deal with things that come my way. I found how to balance things. Not always. Sometimes I go a lower vibrational, but then I bring it back up because when you work at balance, you know when you're not in balance. You know when things are off.
yeah,
Either way, I tell people like with our chakras, they spin both ways for a reason. We can put things in and we can take things out, and it's always so you can find balance. So loving your anger and learning to deal with your anger just as much you learn to deal with your joy
yeah,
it's balance. It's all about balance.
yeah.
Yep.
Wise words. And that's what I appreciate about you, Sally, is you are able to confront people a lot easier than some others, but you always preface it with preparatory language, with, honest attention to detail that you really want to make a difference. And that really comes through. So I love you for that.
Well, there's a good anger, like there's good trouble. Uh, but your anger shouldn't just steep to the point of wanting revenge. You should take your anger and try and process it in the best of ways. And that's where spirituality and forgiveness come into it. We take our anger, and if we don't say anything, it just bottles up inside us. And silence is consent. No matter how you feel, if you don't say anything, that means you agree, is how people are going to say it. And we have to take our anger and channel it into positive ways. And once we've channeled it into positive ways, then we can apply a certain amount of forgiveness, because uh, without forgiveness, I believe that stifles our spirituality, and we can't advance as long as we hold a resentment. And Laura, you told the story about your father coming through. Well, my father came through, and I held a lot of resentment for he and his family. They were all idiots. And once he came through and he said, I have to apologize. I saw everything black and white. You saw everything in Technicolor. Well, surprise, surprise. Uh, and that left me with a whole lot of resentment that really, I had no reason to still hold on to it. And that's where the resentment comes in. But in a Phil swoop, I kind of forgave my father and all of his idiot relatives that had made my life so tough. And in a process, and that provided me an opportunity to advance spiritually in that realm. And I told a girlfriend this, and come to find out, she really has resentment against her mother who's passed over, and she refuses to convey with her mother during a reading or something, because she can't find it in her heart to forgive the woman, no matter what the circumstances may be. And that resentment eats at her. And unless we forgive, uh, the resentment or whatever the emotion is just going to eat our own spirituality and hold us all back. And it's spiritually liberating to forgive somebody. Uh, I've had to forgive some really serious issues in the past, but if I didn't forgive them, the anger, resentment, whatever would just eat at me, and I couldn't never be the individual I want to be. Does that make sense? No.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm wondering if your friend could do it like a cord cutting ceremony or something like that, because like Katrina was saying, it's a heaviness having this resentment in your body and in your field. So I wonder if just kind of some clearing might work with her.
And
And
anger
sometimes,
is different than resentment. Resentment is we're round
Yeah.
and resent, resent, resent.
Yeah.
Angry, okay, I'm angry. Do I have a part here? Is there something I need to give back? Do I need to make amends? I mean, there's so much learning around
Yeah.
it, for
And
me,
that's
I
where
have
you
to.
process your anger. You face it full on and say, okay, what are the underlying courses here? What is my part in all this?
I'm
And
gonna
what
tell,
is my history?
yeah. And I'm gonna say this quick. I lived with two other women. We did all this emotional release work. We were in recovery, blah, blah, blah. And we got home. We were sharing a space. The door was open. We went, uh-oh. So we called the fire department, we called the police. We got, they went inside, they looked around, and they said, okay, come on in. There were three, men standing around. And they said, well, no one's here, but we found this. And it was a big plastic bat. And it said resentment buster. And we said, no, no, that's ours. That's ours.
Well, forgiveness
funny.
can also be a process. And sometimes you
Yeah.
have to do it over and over and over. And that's what I had to do with that picture of my dad. Every time I passed it, I had to forgive again and again and again until finally when I got that word from the man, okay, he said thank you, he's moved on. So it was a process of forgiveness.
It was absolutely a process. When I'm doing aura clearing, there's so many things that come up, and it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. There's something there from here, it's something there from there. Sometimes you get to things you'd be like, I didn't even realize it was this. Um, and that anger, depending on how long you carry it, yeah, it's the same thing. And sometimes you carry it in different parts of your body. You can have shoulder pain, back pain, heartache, all kinds of different pain, but it's how you carry it. And like we were saying, it's heavy. It's heavy in certain ways. It's heavy to where it can affect your physical body. You'll find doctors say there's absolutely nothing wrong with you, and you're like, but I have this pain. It's absolutely real, but it's just learning how to deal with it. And when you let go, we don't let go everything all at one time. There is no one and done because we don't have our experiences that way. These are accumulations of things that have happened from the time that you came into this world, right? That's why we have things that go back to childhood and we just build on it and build on it and build on it until we become adults. Like there's some things that some of us are still building on. And it's just, you just don't release everything all at once. You release things when you're ready.
Yeah.
I think everybody's making some very good points. I remember asking Arnold Michael, who had to sit on a donut because he had his, I guess his rectum or his bottom was painful. So, I guess I was being kind of a smart ass and I was saying, you know, what did you do to cause this? What did you do to cause this? And he said, oh, I know what I did to cause this. I would get so angry at people, I would tell them I could kick them in the butt and all the way up to their brain. So that was his reaction to people.
Karma.
That's how he handled his anger or his resentment. Then when I look at it, what everybody's saying, and then, well, what about your authentic self? What does your authentic self? So I found myself, I'm driving a pontoon boat with like 12, 13 people on it. And I have to pull into a narrow tributary and go through a couple of floats. And everybody's, you know, coming up with their opinion. Oh, you need to go right. No, you need to go left. You need to do this. And I said, what you need to do is shut up and let me do it. So I found, and everybody quieted down. And of course, we got through it okay. Um, I would say that would be an authentic response. But I think when you hold on to resentment, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
It festers.
Mm.
Like having floaties on with weights in them.
Yeah.
Defeats the purpose.
So, Paula, we haven't heard from you. What's going on?
Well, we all know I wrote my book, and that was about being able to forgive. And in the book, I actually forgave my grandfather who molested me. And several months after the book was done, I was dreaming that I had gathered my family on the other side and was talking to them all. And we were having a great party and they were telling me all kinds of good stuff. And who shows up but my grandfather? And I looked at him and I could feel the anger welling up in my chest. And I looked at him and I said, "And what the hell are you doing here?" And he goes, "Ah, you forgot. You forgave me. Get over it."
Wow.
Doesn't like getting a kick in the ass from the spirit world. And I was like, that? Oh, yeah, I guess he was right. So I was actually able to let go. But again, years ago, I read a book by Rabbi Grolman, who was very famous at that time. And the book was When to Forgive and When Not to Forgive. And I was shocked because he actually had some fairly good examples of when not to forgive somebody. But it was more about not necessarily not forgiving, but never forget so that you don't let it happen again. And I've had that experience with one of my sisters in the last year. I have not spoken to her since April because of some of the lies she was telling about me when we were all together. And I held on to that anger for quite a while. And then I said, you know what? It's not worth that because it's eating me alive. Because this is a sister I have loved all my life and taken care of all my life. And to be stabbed that viciously to my other sisters and her daughter, whom I love, was very painful and very hurtful. So I've decided, yes, she's going to be forgiven, but I will never forget, and she will never be a part of my life again. And that is something, a choice I have been willing to live with. And it hasn't been easy because I used to be on the phone with her at least 5 times a week. But as I got into other things, and you've all known I've been rescuing 2 other people in my husband's life for the last 6 months, I realized that I don't miss her, I don't need her, and I don't need the anger. And so when I came home to finally get my head together, which is not together, um, the forgiveness is there. The forgetting will never happen. Um, and I feel that works for me. It may not work for other people, but it's definitely the road I need to take because it will be too hurtful if I completely forgive and forget because it will happen again.
I
So,
read an article last week that forgiveness doesn't have to mean forget.
Right.
The article uh, said that you can have two emotions at the same time, and one does not negate the other as long as you deal with them separately. And the it, and it also forgiveness doesn't mean you consent to what they did, and forgiveness doesn't mean you condone what they did. Uh, Forgiveness is, I think, for your own being, the act of forgiveness, because I mean, it doesn't affect them diddly. Uh, so we're not doing it for them, other than maybe if it's patching up a friendship or something like that. But forgiveness, I think, is an intrinsic thing. Uh, the repaired relationship with the forgiveness is valuable, but it is not. It is the benefit of you spiritually forgiving somebody is uh, what a primary goal is, not not the sole goal, but a primary goal. And that's where, we've talked about having to work on it. It's when we hold resentment that we're not willing to do anything about. Well, all it's going to do is ferment in our brains and fester and fester, and then we finally will be so steamed up that we lash out in anger, and that's and then you have another issue for forgiveness. But it's what it does for you spiritually to actually forgive somebody. And I realized that with my father, I was then able to go on and mentally think of him in a very different way, and not so uh, I can't stand the man for what he did, but more understanding. And I wish I had the opportunity to know what his parents were like, because I bet you that explains a lot of him. His father was born in 1875, so you can imagine the mentality that my father grew up with in a little house in the prairie on steroids.
Well, I had an idea with this topic, and it started last week when Sally D came to visit. She was back for a minute. And I'm wondering if we can turn this, and maybe Caitlin, because you started this Inspiring the Inspired series for the ministry, if we might consider taking on some of these topics as teaching moments. And so I put together a little bit of a course that we might be able to utilize as a ministry. And I would love for all of you to give input. And even if it's don't do that, but I'm going to put this in the chat, and I've got the link to the course itself. And it's just draft. It doesn't have to stay the way that it is. It might be because I tend to lean on the good vibes only side of the conversation. So please push back and add any thoughts that you might have. And then after I did the course, I thought, maybe I can write a blog post on this and try to put on my jacket of who my identity is formulating to be, and come at this with some sort of an angle. And I came at it from the quantum field and this whole new science, because I was trained as a science back in the day where science didn't approve of metaphysics and they didn't approve of woo woo. And now all of a sudden, everything is coming together and everything's becoming more confirmed. So I'm trying this on, and I would love your feedback. And I would invite you too to also write blogs for the page if you are so inclined.
So if we wrote a blog, would we submit it to you and then it would get posted on the website?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's also a form, but it's not as easy to navigate. So
yeah. And then so along with that, I would suggest again that it would be useful if we also had another button that is for other ministers to contribute their ceremonies and their prayers, the verbiage and whatnot, so that others of us could, look at that as well. And so if somebody has done some work around forgiveness, they could post kind of their ceremony, if you will.
That's a good idea. Okay. Thank you.
But I like the idea if the website kind of leaned more towards sharing from a teaching student. We all vacillate between being teachers and students, and so we could keep that flow going.
Okay.
That would be nice.
I like that. Awesome. And I think we're coming up. I think it's this Friday. We're going to have our marketing and outreach meeting, which includes the website updates. I'm going to invite an intern that's interested in doing some graphic design work and or marketing for us. And so she's going to be introduced if you want to come. It's Friday, 11 Pacific, 1 Central, and 2 Eastern on Friday at this same link. Anybody's welcome.
So before we hang up here, I'd like to I have a suggestion or a technique that sometimes works, like an example of Paula and her sister. The technique would be you talk to you if you can talk to your sister and let her know your feelings about how you felt rejected and so hurt. If you can do it in a way you're not putting blame or shame on the sister, if you can do it from a authentic point of view that yeah, this hurt me. I felt devastated and blah blah blah, and and you can do it in such a way that the person knows that you're not condemning them for their behavior. You're letting them know how you felt. It opens up the portal of discussion, a possibility of healing, so that the person you don't have to avoid that person anymore. If it's a technique that sometimes works.
I like that,
Thank you.
Charlie, because it
Thank
allows
you.
for you to express that emotion, even if it's in the chaotic state, and get it off your plate. It's almost like the cord cutting. It's like, okay, that's no longer with me. Now I
Yeah,
get to go on with my life. I love that.
yeah. I had a boss one time. I was in the office having a discussion with him, and all of a sudden he told me that he felt threatened by me, and I had no clue. I was clueless. I had to step back and wonder why would he? What is it I've done? And, what made him feel that way? But I'm glad he was honest with me,
Yeah.
because if he wasn't, then there's a barrier to the discussion.
I know
Oh,
for me, many years ago in my early 20s, I was in a therapy session and there was it was group therapy, and it was obvious that there was this one gentleman who had an issue with me, a big one. He was very hostile towards me, and there wasn't anything obvious that I had said or done. And the therapist was wonderful in harnessing this because I was mortified. That was back in the day when I was a horrible codependent, and my self-esteem was just through the floor if anybody didn't like me. And so I was really struggling with this, and the therapist really brought it in. It was life-changing for me. And the reason I bring this up is about the forgiveness is, first of all, the first thing that I was taught from that experience when the therapist worked through that with that guy in the group therapy, it turned out, long story short, it absolutely had nothing to do with me personally. It was something in my physicalness or demeanor or something reminded him of somebody that he had uh, issue with. And it really turned me, my perspective on life and my role in life and how I show up in relation to other people. It really pivoted me in that a lot of what people, if not most, what people do is really not because of us or due to us per se. And that was the first thing. And so from there, as I matured, I learned that if somebody shows up in a way that it speaks to I've offended them or bothered them or something, disturbed them, that instead of making assumptions, I just come right out and ask them, is there something that I've said or done that has bothered you? And then they'll either admit that there was directly or just no, not really. I'm just going through a bad time and I'm just irritated in general. And oftentimes it's really not something that we have said or done directly that I feel I would need to take responsibility for. But the good thing is, and from the 12-step program that taught me this is, don't assume that I'm at fault, number one. And number two, seek to understand. And number three, if the opportunity presents itself and the person feels that I said or did something, then I can make amends in that moment and then be done with it. Now, if that person doesn't accept the amends, I accept the amends for myself and I'm okay with it. And it does not involve an fu attitude towards the other person, like, well, screw you, I said I'm sorry, and if you don't want to accept, it's not about that. It's understanding that energetically that person's in that space, choosing to be in that space, and not releasing that energy, but I'm going to release the energy for me out of self-care. So, something along the lines of that, Paula, too, with your sister, is just releasing the energy, but with love and understanding, but also not inviting her energy in to your sphere to continue to impact you negatively. So,
Caitlin, that's a great example. You even though you had low self-esteem, you found the courage within yourself to be open and vulnerable and ask the question.
Thank you. I was at the place, I was in a really, I struggled with suicide ideation. So, but it turned out to be a really good time for me because I was in a place of such emotional desperation that I really felt the only choices that I had was to show up differently, because how I was showing up created the suicide ideation. And then, of course, I learned about family dynamics, and I grew up in an alcoholic family as well. So a lot of that learning and understanding allowed for me to release the negative tie that I had with my thought process and my belief system, which was erroneous and faulty and dysfunctional. And so I just dedicated years to unravel that. And it's not always a fun journey, but it's very rewarding when all is said and done.
Exactly. To change the subject, does anybody know how Cindy is doing?
She's good. She's good. She's back working. It was a tough couple of weeks for her, but she's good. She's off with her husband today doing something fun. So she did call me this morning to tell me that she wouldn't be online. But yeah, she's good. Back to work.
Well, I guess our prayers helped. So
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And we're still putting Cheryl on the prayer list as well, Paula's friend in Florida.
Yes, she appreciates that. They've got a new medication, a pill now that's supposed to be better than the chemo, IV.
Good.
So she's put her faith in that, and she does not have to live in the hospital for 3 months like she did last time. She's in an apartment for a couple of weeks until they stabilize things. So she thanks you all again for your wonderful prayers. She can feel them, and she feels that it's what's got her through the last year and a half. She says, just don't give up on me yet.
Beautiful. So I do have a closing blessing if nobody else does.
Yay.
Okay. This is also in the course, so feel free to edit or do anything you want. May all who carry the wounds of violation find the path to liberation. May their anger transform into wisdom, their pain into purpose, their isolation into connection. May they know they are not alone and they are not broken, and their healing serves the healing of all beings. However, we name the sacred, God, Goddess, Universe, Creator, Life Force, or human dignity. May it guide us in molding both fierce love and gentle compassion as we walk this path together.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And next week we have Katrina, Mystic Magic. Do you have a title for whatever you're going to present to us, Katrina?
Maybe.
The reason I ask is because I have at least one other person, maybe two, that want to come and listen in on your
So
teachings.
it's going to be healing waters. We're going to make an elixir.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah, we'll be using color magic and or stones. We're going to make a healing elixir.
Beautiful.
Or if you want something else, but yeah.
I could use that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Should be lots of fun.
Yeah. All right. So I will see you either on Friday or next Sunday.
Yep. Thank you.
Love to you all.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Have a great week. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Blessings.
Bye.